Penny Hinara.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Speaker. E mua lava ona sii le veinga ma le mamalu mo lenei aso ua mawhai ai ona tātou mafuta whātasi. Mr. Speaker, thank you for this contribution. Yeah, my Samoan is amateur at best, but I thought I'd take this opportunity to acknowledge Samoan Language Week, and thank you once again, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to contribute to this particular bill. Mr. Speaker, there have been some great speeches across the House, and they've talked about some of the sad outcomes of poor decisions made, perhaps poor monitoring, perhaps poor legislation. And I think this is a good opportunity to come into the House this evening to look at this particular bill, to work out, well, does it actually meet the intention? Is it going to do what it says it's going to do? And furthermore, how will this affect New Zealand moving forward, both on the side of the offender and also the community at large? Mr. Speaker, the House has already spoken about technology catching up with legislation, and I think that's a great step forward. In fact, it's been a long time coming. And I'd argue that probably by the time that this bill actually passes through into law, the technology is going to change again, and we'll leave it behind again, and we'll probably be back sometime in the near future to debate this particular bill or make some particular amendments to this bill in the near future. But we commend the step forward. Technology plays an important part, Mr. Speaker, but I want to flip this on its head, because I think that one of the parts in here, in the particular bill, Mr. Speaker, around, and I quote here, prisoners have for many years been temporarily released or granted escorted absences from prison or for several recognised purposes, such as funerals. And I want to just touch on that briefly, Mr. Speaker. I wonder how technology would keep up with the vast metropolis of Miti in the far north. If I understand it correct, this particular piece of technology will allow GPS to monitor where this offender is at any point in time. And I wonder if that'll happen in Miti, where there is no, there is no internet, there is no cell phone coverage, and I can't see anything in this particular legislation that says we're going to now be commanding satellites to follow these things, because I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, and to the member across the way, that even when you drive out there, you look at your iPhone and you've punched in there Miti. I can tell you, just past Waiho near Panguru, it cuts out. It's not going to work. It loses you in the system. It loses you in the system. So while I acknowledge that technology has a part to play, you cannot beat human supervision. And in instances like that, I think it's really important for us to remember that. Let's applaud the advances in technology and this particular bill that'll keep up with it, but you cannot beat human supervision for most parts, because the other part of that argument, Mr. Speaker, is just actually very recently, only on Monday, I was at a tangihanga, or a hui mate we call it in Ngāpuhi, Māori 101, and of a kaumātua by the name of Hoterene Tipene, or Bossy Tipene they called him, great kaumātua for Tāmaki Makaurau. And his son has had his troubles with the law. His Bossy was kept in Auckland long enough for his son to be released from prison so that he could farewell his father before his father made the long trek back up to Taitokerau, Ngāti Hine, Tauhenare Marae, named after, not young Tauhenare, old Tauhenare. Anyway, it was interesting because when they brought my uncle, the offender, into the marae, or the church where we congregated, they refused to remove the handcuffs. And while I take the point from Mahesh Bindra, who said that at times like that, where there's only one entry and one exit into this particular congregation, into this particular building, I thought that a bit of compassion could have been shown. By all means, let's have the supervision there at hand, ready to do their job. I agree with that. But to allow this particular person the opportunity to grieve for a short time before being taken back into prison. So, Mr. Speaker, in a very pragmatic way, which is how this side of the House operates, I volunteered my services and the offender was handcuffed to my hand as a family member, and I was able to lead them through to pay their respects. So there's several arguments here, but I guess this is part of the vagaries around some of these bills, and we want to make sure that we get it right, make sure that the intention of these bills are actually met. Mr. Speaker, it's been mentioned in this House, rehabilitation, proper reintegration. And we argue on this side that, well, in order for this to happen, quite a lot of things actually need to take place. It's not as simple as clipping on a monitoring device and making sure that you can check this person by GPS, because I think just as important, Mr. Speaker, to allow the reintegration is actually to make sure that the community of Aotearoa, New Zealand, are familiar with these types of bills, and this bill in particular. Because the perception of the community, regardless of how strong electronic monitoring might be, the advances of technology, the perception of this community is that person is still an offender. And I wonder then, Mr. Speaker, if this actually is proper reintegration, to make sure that the communities feel safe, to make sure that the communities can go about their daily business, and also the offender can reintegrate successfully into society. Now, we've heard the sad case this evening by many of the speakers in the House. To see that repeated again, sir, would absolutely be tragic. And I hope that this particular bill can go some way to fixing that, to make sure it doesn't happen again. Mr. Speaker, as mentioned, we will be supporting this bill, but I wonder, in my short time in Parliament, Mr. Speaker, we've passed quite a number of bills that tinker around the edges by this government. And what we've noticed with a lot of these bills, and this one is no exception, is that the pressure is now being placed on front line. So it's great to have this great technology advancement, but somebody's got to monitor it, somebody's got to sit there, somebody's got to make sure that the technology actually does its role, performs its role, and that's effective monitoring of offenders. It still requires a human capacity. And I wonder, Mr. Speaker, in the recent budget, sure, there was a little bit of money for rehabilitation stuff. Some might call it a slush fund, a bit of a fund that's available for some of the rehabilitation programs. But essentially, we need more capacity at the front line to make sure that the type of monitoring that the community in Aotearoa, New Zealand expects from legislation or bills such as this actually happens, to make all and sundry feel safe. Finally, Mr. Speaker, just in conclusion, we do support this, and I believe that most New Zealanders, I repeat, most New Zealanders don't actually understand the implications of this bill. So it will be the responsibility of the members out in the wider community, but more importantly in this House, to share that message, to make sure that they are able to fully understand this, so that reintegration works for both sides, the community and the offender moving forward. On this side of the House, Mr. Speaker, we will be supporting this bill.